In the late 19th century, the American presidency functioned as a quiet, administrative desk job. The men occupying the White House rarely spoke directly to the public, preferring to let a slow-moving Congress handle the actual business of governing. Real power resided elsewhere. A handful of wealthy industrialists and financiers, men like J.P. Morgan, had consolidated control over the nation's railroads, steel, and oil. They operated without federal interference, treating the government as a silent partner. That stable arrangement fractured on September 6, 1901. During a public reception at the Pan American Exposition in Buffalo, New York, an anarchist shot President William McKinley twice in the stomach. He lingered for 8 days before dying. Political bosses had deliberately engineered the Republican ticket that year to trap a troublesome, reform-minded politician in the vice presidency, a role intended to keep him silent and powerless. With McKinley gone, their trap failed. The bureaucratic machinery of Washington was suddenly inherited by a 42-year-old force of nature. Theodore Roosevelt was the youngest president in American history, and his temperament stood in absolute defiance of the passive office he now commanded. He had spent his life seeking out physical hardship. He wrote books on naval history, hunted big game, ran a cattle ranch in the Dakota Territory, and personally led a volunteer cavalry regiment into Spanish rifle fire in Cuba. A man accustomed to unrelenting forward momentum now controlled a federal system engineered for inaction. The question was whether the man would conform to the office or if the office would break under the weight of the man. Roosevelt's obsession with vitality began in a fragile body. As a boy in New York City, he suffered from severe asthma. In the 1860s, these attacks left him gasping for air through the night, a condition that operated as a persistent threat to his life. Rather than accept his physical limits, he built a gym in his family home. He boxed, rode, and lifted weights until his arms shook, deciding he would force his lungs to cooperate through punishing, systematic exertion. He applied this identical logic to his deepest emotional wounds. On February 12, 1884, his young wife and his mother died in the same house, hours apart. He moved to the freezing Dakota Badlands and worked alongside hardened cowboys to ride the grief out of his system. When the Spanish-American War broke out, he held a comfortable post as Assistant Secretary of the Navy. He immediately resigned and shipped out to the front lines to put his body directly in the path of danger. By the time he took the oath of office in 1901, his worldview was completely forged. He arrived at the White House with a hard-won conviction that the only response to any form of weakness was an immediate and relentless charge. Roosevelt immediately applied this philosophy of aggressive intervention to the Oval Office. He viewed the passive state of the government as a failure of will. In 1902, he directed his Justice Department to bypass the usual backroom negotiations and sue the Northern Securities Company, J.P. Morgan's massive railroad monopoly in the Northwest. The Supreme Court eventually sided with the White House, breaking the trust apart. When lumber and mining companies pushed into Western territories, Roosevelt didn't wait for Congress to pass protective laws. He signed executive orders to secure 230 million acres of national forests, parks, and monuments. That same year, 150,000 Pennsylvania coal miners went on strike as winter approached. Instead of sending troops to break the strike, he summoned the mine owners and union leaders to Washington and threatened to nationalize the mines unless they agreed to arbitration. He showed the same willingness to shatter social precedents. He formally received educator Booker T. Washington for dinner at the White House, a departure from racial norms that drew intense public backlash. These rapid interventions inverted the established American power structure. Roosevelt made it clear that the federal government, not private industry, held the ultimate authority in the United States. He characterized the presidency as a bully pulpit, a highly visible megaphone used to bypass party bosses and speak directly to the American people. He branded his legislative agenda the Square Deal. It established a new framework for domestic politics, arguing that the government existed to actively promote citizen welfare, rather than merely protecting property. This drive was a deeply held personal conviction. Long after leaving the White House, he challenged his own successor, running for a third term under a third party in 1912. During a campaign stop in Milwaukee, a man shot Roosevelt in the chest. The bullet passed through a metal glasses case and a thick manuscript in his breast pocket. Bleeding into his shirt, he waved off medical assistants and stood on stage for 84 minutes to deliver his remarks. He announced to the stunned crowd that it took more than a bullet to kill a bull moose. He lived his philosophy of striving valiantly, proving his physical momentum could overcome nearly any obstacle. But that mindset carried a severe human cost. He raised his sons to seek out conflict, and all four fought in World War I. In July 1918, his youngest son, Quentin, was shot down over a French airfield. The famous Roosevelt energy vanished, and it never returned. 6 months later, Roosevelt died in his sleep at his Sagamore Hill estate. Upon hearing the news, his former vice president remarked that death had to take him sleeping, because if he had been awake, there would have been a fight. The land he saved and the monopolies he broke remain, but his primary impact was on the nature of the office itself. He encountered a presidency designed for administration, leaving one defined by personal conviction and public appeal.
Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. It really helps us.